The years start coming and they truly don't stop coming. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and I am going to take you through my life in some of the most important books that I have found throughout it. There are a couple of books throughout those years that have just left such a huge impact with me that I don't think I would be the person that I am or the reader that I am without having read those. First up is Roald Dahl, and specifically Matilda and the BFG. The BFG is one of those books that will always stand out to me as one of the starts of my reading journey. My dad and I used to read the BFG together every single night before I went to sleep. I remember that I had bunk beds when I was maybe 4, 5, 6 years old. And at the start, my dad would read the story the whole way through. But when I started to learn to read for myself, I would take over the role of Sophie, whereas my dad would read the narrator and the BFG parts. And I think that is the time that really started my love of reading and how much it can connect people and how much it can bring people together and sharing stories like that. It's such a lovely memory that I always look back on so fondly, and it's definitely something that I think other people should try too. Then talking about Matilda. Matilda is the first ever chapter book that I read cover to cover by myself. I think I would have been maybe about 7 or 8 when I actually did that. And last year, to kind of bring it full circle, Matilda was the first book that I read cover to cover in German as well, and I understood it. I wanted to see how good my reading comprehension was in German, if it was at the time where I could understand everything, if I needed to stop and look words up every now and then, how much of it I really needed to concentrate on. Turns out, I understood a lot more of it than I thought that I would be able to. Two of the big really group of friendship books that I remember reading were The Sleepover Club and The Babysitter's Club. The Babysitter's Club is one that I go back to time and time again if I need some comfort, if I need a book that is just going to be really quick, really short. I might get it done in like an hour and a half. They're generally about under 200 pages, but they do talk about some really tough and difficult topics for teenagers to read, such as divorce, bereavement, blended families, all kind of situations. That's something I had never experienced, had never heard about, had never thought about. It was really eye-opening and really interesting to see how these people who were roughly the same age as me were dealing with all of that. As for the Sleepover Club, this was a group of 5 young girls. I cannot remember all their names. I think it was Daisy, Kenny, Lindsay, Fliss, and Laura, I think was the last one. These 5 girls, who again were around 9, 10, 11 years old, were all in the same class in school, and they would all go to each other's houses after school on Friday and sleep over. And I don't know what it was about this, but I just loved the idea of having this tight-knit group of 5 friends who all had plans together on a Friday night, who all hung out together at lunchtime. I don't know what it was. I think it was just a really genuinely heartwarming thing to see it. I do remember that there was a TV adaptation, and I remember being horrifically salty that it had been taken from the UK and was now set in Australia. But it also did give me a chance to see what life in Australia was like, so maybe it wasn't a bad thing after all. Another series that had a big friendship group in it, and one that I really associated myself with the main character, was The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot. There's 10 books in this series, and I read all 10 of them maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And it's definitely one that I don't know if it's aged as well as we think it has, but I would love to do like a really big deep dive into it. The Princess Diaries is about Mia Thermopolis, a 14-year-old who lives in New York and finds out that she is the heir to the throne of a small European principality. And her life really explodes from here. She is now not just dealing with math problems, boy problems, falling out with her friends, getting back together with her friends, but also learning how to greet dignitaries when she's at a ball. I loved this series when I was younger. I really associated with Mia having a really big affinity for English, not a big ability to count, having absolutely no power in math class. And there was just something about this book that I just really found a lot of comfort in them. But like I said, I'm not entirely sure if they have matured as well as other books have. It might be one to go back and take a look at. An author who I really loved when I was maybe 7, 8, 9 is Jacqueline Wilson. And if I had to sit down and think which is my favorite Jacqueline Wilson book, I think I would genuinely struggle. It changes on a daily basis. Some days it is Tracy Beaker, some days it is Double Act, some days it's The Bed and Breakfaster. Something that I love about Jacqueline Wilson's books is that they don't shy away from dealing with really tough topics that genuinely do affect young children in UK and the world these days. Things again like homelessness, like broken families, like divorce, like bereavement, like parental abandonment. There are so many topics that are dealt with in Jackie Wilson's books, but they are never dealt with in a way that you feel they are demeaning to the readers. You never feel like she's talking down to them. In fact, it's actually explaining it in a way that makes it a lot more relatable, that makes it a lot easier for younger minds to read and to understand. Jacqueline Wilson is still writing. I have kind of aged out of her books quite a lot, so I haven't gone back to any of them recently. But I do know that if I ever need some comfort, they will always be there. A YA book that truly left its mark on me is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I think this is one of my favorite books of all time. I can still vividly remember lying in my bed at home. I was about 18, 19 at the time. I was definitely in my last year at school. And reading the last couple of chapters and tears just streaming down my face. I also then watched the adaptation of it a couple of years later, and again, the floodgates opened. I don't cry a lot at movies, I don't cry a lot at books or TV shows, so this is definitely one that left a mark on me. The Book Thief is about Liesel, who lives in a small town in Germany called Möchking in the middle of the Second World War, and the book is narrated by Death. You would think is quite busy at the moment, so might not have time to talk about things like this, and you really get to see what life was like for people who were just living in towns that had been bombed and had been basically turned on their heads throughout the entire time. I really loved this book the first time that I read it. I read it again a couple of years ago and it blew me away just as much. So hopefully if I read it again for a third time soon, it'll do just the same thing. Another really standout YA novel to me is Forget by Ruth Gilligan, and there's a couple of reasons that this one really stands out to me. I think the first is that it was set in Ireland. I had not read up until then a lot of books that were set in Ireland. A lot of the reading I'd done was set in the UK, was set in the US. So seeing somebody talking about things that I had a personal understanding of, that I knew, places in Dublin that I had been to on days that I'd been up there with my family, exams and subjects that I had taken and studied. It was just another level of recognition for me in the book. It was something that I knew I could truly see myself in this character. I could truly see myself doing the things that they were doing, more so than I had any other character I'd read. I think something else that I really enjoyed about the book though is that Ruth Gilligan and I are of similar ages, and she had found success as a writer. And at the time, I was kind of trying to write short stories, trying to write novels, but not really going anywhere with it. And I just remember sitting back and thinking, well, if she can do it, why the hell can't I? And I just really ploughed along with it. Nothing has ever come of it. None of the stories I've written have ever seen the light of day, but it did give me that little bit of hope of, if anyone else can do it, why can't I too? When I think about reading in my earlier mid-20s, there's really one series that just kind of puts everything together, and that is the I Heart series by Lindsay Kelk. I sped through that series. I absolutely ate it up whole. And I have it to thank for one of my closest friendships in my life. There was a girl that I met at a party one evening. I think it was my cousin's 18th or something like that. And we just bonded over our love of reading. And this was a series that both of us had read. I think by then there were maybe 3 books out in the series. Anytime a new one came out, we were talking to each other about it. We were reading it. We were sharing ideas. And we still keep in touch to this day. And we still talk about Lindsay Kelk's books. And we still keep in touch about all the things that happened in our lives. But it was such a foundation of our friendship and of our relationship that it just holds a little special place in my heart, that series. Another really defining book for me is My Map of You by Isabel Broom. And the reason for that is it is the first book that I ever got as an advanced reader copy. I used to run a book blog with the same name as this channel back in like 2015, 2016 though. I turned it from just random brain dumps, random ideas into a more structured, I want to talk about book reviews blog. I reached out to a couple of publishers, I reached out to a couple of authors, and Isabel was probably one of the first people that ever responded to me and said, my debut book is coming out in a couple of months, would you be interested to give it a try? I got in touch with her, gave her my address, and everything kicked off from there. It was the first book that I think had ever been sent for review that I published on my blog. And I have adored Isabel's books ever since. They are a really great way to travel around without having spent too much money, without having to go and get vaccines, without leaving your house if it's raining. I really love her books. They're so heartwarming, they're so welcoming, and you get to experience a whole other corner of the globe too. Then you have The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, and this is the first ever steamy adult book that I ever read. I read this in May of 2020, and up until then, a lot of the romance that I read had been relatively closed door. There hadn't been a whole lot of sex scenes in there, there hadn't been a whole lot of smut. It was just basically small town romances where they might hold hands with each other, they might kiss each other. You might have heard that they hooked up the night before, but you definitely don't watch them do it. This book really opened my eyes to a whole new set of books and a whole new world that I just instantly fell in love with. There was so much that I really enjoyed about this book. I haven't reread it since, and I wonder if it's going to hold up the same as I really enjoyed it the first time, because I know a couple of people haven't really loved it. They haven't loved a couple of things that the groom has said. They haven't loved a couple of things that the main characters have done to each other. But I wonder if I go back to it, am I going to feel something different, or am I still going to enjoy it as much? Finally, we want to the book that if somebody were to ask me today what my favorite book is, it's this one. I am still spellbound by The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I remember reading this book on a plane to Vienna to start like a week-long solo trip around Vienna, Budapest, and Bratislava. I read a good chunk of it on the plane. I think it was like an hour and a half flight or so. I read a good chunk of it there, and I was just so mesmerized by it, so spellbound by it. I dropped my bags off to the Airbnb. I went right into Vienna city centre and found not like a cafe, not something like really Viennese. I found a McDonald's, got some chicken nuggets, got a drink, and sat down for another 2 hours and just finished the book. I did not want to leave. I did not want to do anything. I just wanted to finish it. There was just so much about this book that kept you wondering, that kept you turning every single page. I've recommended this book to a couple of friends of mine. Every single one of them has loved it as much as I did, which makes me think that I've got friends who have a similar reading taste to me, but also my book recommendations do pretty well. Those are some of the books that I have loved and that have made a huge impact on me throughout my life. What book has made a huge impact on you throughout your life, or are there any books here that you have also been impacted by? If you'd love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me the birthday cake emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.